Colton Poucy from The Athletic is with us today. A lot of questions where this thing is headed into week 3.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Matt Derry with you. It's a Wednesday edition of Locked On Lions right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Indeed, your team every day. Wednesday, September 20th and a Thursday, September 21st. We're getting closer to Sunday and Game 3 and Game 2 of the home schedule with the Falcons coming in. For those of you watching on our Locked On Lions YouTube channel, you see him on the screen. Colton Poucy is with us from theathletic.com. Covers the Lions. We'll talk to Colton about all the injuries, Dan Campbell decision-making, and everything going on with this football team. We'll do that momentarily. Locked On Lions today is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Follow us on Twitter at Derry Speaks, at Locked On Lions. Follow Colton at Colton_Pouncey. He's with us today. Colton, good to see you. How are you?
Not bad, Matt. How are you doing?
Good, brother. Good to see you again. It's been an interesting couple of weeks. You and I were talking before we hit record here. Never a dull moment down at 2-2-2, but what's the biggest storyline and theme for you through 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you asked Lions fans if they'd be happy with 1-1 start after 2 games, they would. Playing the Chiefs and the Seahawks, 2 2022 playoff teams. So record-wise, I think it's about what you'd expect. But, I mean, the injuries, man, it's hard to kind of ignore them. They're starting to pile up. The roster, these are players that we're kind of going to be dependent on. And the guys that they're missing now are their depth pieces, they're, starters. So the team looks a little bit different now than it did when the season started. So while they're 1-1, I do think there are some concerns going forward. And that's kind of my takeaway through 2 games.
What's the biggest injury that you think is going to hinder this team the most? What one are you most worried about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my mind starts with C.J. Gardner-Johnson because that was a guy that, they signed to kind of revamp the secondary. He spent time with Aaron Glenn. So I think the fact that he hasn't been, the fact that he's going to miss some time going forward, we'll see how long, if it's the season or maybe he can come back in December, something like that. I guess we'll find out. But in the meantime, they're going to miss him a lot because he's a surefire tackler. He's a ball hawk. He led the league in interceptions a year ago. And when you're missing a guy like that, it certainly hurts. And then on the offensive side of the ball, guy like David Montgomery, we'll see how long he's out. But, that's sort of your workhorse back right now. It doesn't seem like Gibbs, they're confident in giving him the touches right now. So he's sort of the guy offensively that can kind of keep things going and, keep the pieces together. So losing those 2 guys right now kind of hurts. But CJ, definitely more long-term injury.
What's your take on the Montgomery situation in terms of timing? Because Dan Campbell is, he's usually really transparent with this stuff. And obviously when they IR guys, they're going to miss at least 4, 5, 6 weeks. But what's your take on Montgomery? Is there any chance you think he could play Sunday or no?
Maybe. I was kind of surprised when Dan Campbell said that he was day-to-day. And I guess I have noticed sometimes in the past he uses day-to-day when he means more week-to-week. So maybe that's sort of what it is. And they see how he does in practice. We'll get out there kind of later today and see what the practice guys are looking like. But in the meantime, I don't know if he'll be able to go on Sunday. It seems like it would be kind of optimistic for me to say that right now. But if it is, Dan Campbell's version of day-to-day, maybe he's back next week. You probably want him back for that Packers game, I imagine. So maybe they just try to, ease his workload this week and try to get him back next week.
They take Gibbs with the 12th overall pick, and we're seeing what Bijan Robinson is doing at number 8 with the Falcons. And yet Campbell yesterday morning on the morning show on the ticket said, well, we're not going to just throw Gibbs in there in the Montgomery role. It's not going to be just him and between the tackles. How do you think that, how do you see the utilization of Gibbs so far? Anytime he touched the ball in the Thursday game against the Chiefs, I loved it. But are you a little bit surprised that there hasn't been more of him so far?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you draft a running back 12th overall. I know people didn't really love that pick just because of the narrative around, running backs and positional value and whatnot. I certainly understand it, but it seemed like all offseason they were saying, no, we're trying to get him involved. You'll be surprised by the way that we're using him. And then they just haven't really used him a ton. So maybe it's just a product of, he's still young. They're trying to work him in a little bit. They're not trying to overwhelm him, but based on what we saw in practice, he looked ready to go. I know he's had a few mistakes here. Like, I know he dropped a pass in that game that probably would have been a big gain. Maybe they don't really trust him in pass protection yet, but that's a weapon that you drafted 12th overall for a reason. So, like, I'm kind of confused why they're not using him a little bit more.
Colton Poucy with us from theathletic.com. Subscribe and check out everything that Colton has to offer with his Lions coverage, a lot of great angles and everything that he's been doing the last couple of years on this beat. By the way, thank God you're gone from the MSU beat, right?
It's a little bit of a mess right now, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
All right, so you look at the end of the game the other day, and you and I were talking about this off mic here. Dan Campbell's explanation, and I know you'll probably get more in the coming days, but the explanation he gave yesterday, which really floored me about, we treated the end of the game almost like the end of the half because they thought they were going to get the ball back. But, of course, going into overtime, you lose the coin toss and you give up a touchdown. You don't touch the ball. What do you think of this whole thing? And is it a giant gaffe, a small gaffe? How do you view this and what took place with 2 minutes to go the other day?
Yeah, it seemed very apparent to me as I was playing out, and I think I even tweeted it, that Dan Campbell was comfortable playing for the field goal and trying to win in overtime. But the problem with that is if you lose a coin toss, you might not get a chance, especially if your defense is kind of reeling, which it was in that game. So, the Seahawks obviously marched down the field, scored the touchdown, and ended it right there. So I think in hindsight, you can look back at, what did you not do? Why didn't you take a shot there at the end of regulation? Even one for the end zone, just kind of put it out there. Like, the offense had been playing well, so you could probably trust them to kind of, go for a score and just end it there. But that didn't really happen. I think Jared Goff said that he missed Amon-Ra St. Brown over the middle on one of those plays, which I watched the tape back and he did. Probably would have been a first down, got him down to like the 15 or something like that. And then maybe that's where you take your shot after that. But, didn't go that way, and they ended up playing for the field goal, got it, and lost in overtime. And that's kind of the rules of the NFL. People don't love the overtime rules, but it is what it is. And if you don't win the coin toss, then you might not get a chance.
Do you worry about his decision-making? And obviously what he has done with this franchise and the culture and the locker room, the guys playing for him, he's been great with the media and all that stuff. But as far as the, down the stretch, whether it was Minnesota last year at Minnesota, whether it was this past week, is it still a concern for you?
I guess you want your coach to be more aggressive more often than not. And I think that's what Campbell is, obviously, as he's proven over the years. I saw a statistic. I don't have it exactly in front of me, but I believe Campbell was one of the, top 5 coaches in win probability added a year ago. I think through 2 weeks, he also leads the NFL this year. So, he is aggressive and he's gotten them in some good moments, like the Chiefs game when he went for it on from the 17 and picked up the first down. They ended up scoring a touchdown that drive. Going for it again in the Seahawks game, I believe he had another touchdown there. So, you're going to win some and lose some. I think at the end of the day, you want your coach to be more aggressive than conservative. So that's what Campbell is. And he's not going to change. And that's kind of how he's always been, I guess.
Ben Johnson offense, you mentioned before about Jahmyr Gibbs, but you have to think this week, especially after what we saw in week 2 from Sam Laporta, that kid's going to get more touches this week, right?
Yeah, so Laporta looked awesome, man. Like, he's really doing actually everything that they wanted him to do, everything that he's kind of shown in training camp from what we saw. And my only pause was sometimes you don't know with rookie tight ends how they're going to come along, how long it takes them to adjust to the NFL level. But his blocking looks ready to go. There may be a few plays here and there that he kind of misses, but for the most part, he's giving effort. He's throwing his body in there. He's catching passes. So he's kind of been this all-around player that they expected him to be, and that's kind of why they drafted him in the second round.
Talk some defense. We'll do that coming up next with Colton Poucy right here on Locked On Lions. First, I got to tell you about our friends at eBay Motors and everything that we talked about with eBay Motors. It's so much fun. Our partners at eBay Motors, they've teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouring the waiver wire because you got injuries or whatever else, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked this week on the eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Folks, here's what Vinny likes this week. Ravens rookie receiver Zay Flowers. He had a fine debut in week 1 before a more modest week 2, but Flowers will go into full bloom while cruising to a big game on a weak Colts secondary at home in week 3. Flowers will be schemed open as well as Baltimore's new look passing game continues to find more life with Lamar Jackson. So Vinny likes Zay Flowers. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows the championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. They got brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride for the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Gotta love it. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. Website is easy to navigate and get to. ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Back with Colton Poucy from theathletic.com. He's covered the Lions the last couple of years for the Athletic. Lions will face the Falcons at home this Sunday. By the way, Colton, this will be a fun game. I mean, Bijan Robinson in Atlanta off to a 2-0 start. I don't think you look at the schedule, they had 2 home games, Carolina and Green Bay, but this game has some intrigue all of a sudden, doesn't it?
It does. And actually, before the season, I kind of circled this one as a game that could be tougher for the Lions than people anticipated. I know the way the Falcons finished last year, but I mean, when you got the talent that they have, like a Drake London first-round receiver, Kyle Pitts, if they ever decide to use him, Bijan Robinson, just, you know, the kind of talent that he is, which he's a player that I thought the Lions should have taken a look at. And so you got these collective pieces and a coach like Arthur Smith who puts them in positions to succeed. Yeah, it's going to be a fun one and really intrigued, especially the narrative with these two running backs. They'll probably be linked together for a while, and yeah, it should be a fun one.
We're going to talk to Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons tomorrow on the crossover, but one other thing on them, it's interesting, you know, Ritter can't do anything the first 3 quarters of games, but in the fourth, the last 2 weeks, all of a sudden has woken up. And obviously the Lions have had some issues with running quarterbacks, and just, you know, Mahomes and Smith have done decent, although the Lions did pretty well against Patrick Mahomes. But how do you kind of look at how they handle things defensively?
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to get their pass rush back on track. That's sort of been an issue the past 2 weeks, to say the least. 1 sack through 2 games. And I did some numbers. I looked at the numbers a little bit for a story earlier this week, and the pressures are there. I think the Lions are tied for 5th in the NFL with 35 pressures, which might not seem like that's the case, but they are getting close. They are, you know, in the general vicinity, but they're not closing and they're not finishing. So if you can rattle a young quarterback like Desmond Ritter and maybe give him less time to throw, I think the Lions are giving up the most average time to throw per snap in the NFL right now. So if you can cut back on that a little bit and try to rattle him a little bit, maybe you have a chance at slowing down that offense. But they are looking pretty good right now, I'll say that.
Colton, what do you do at the edge spot? We know how Aiden Hutchinson has been. Not the greatest game for him this past week. Many fans thought he was held on that last play. But James Houston now out for a while. Charles Harris and Romeo Okwara. Romeo was a healthy scratch of the day, but those guys off the edge haven't given you much yet. How do you get more pressure? What do you think Aaron Glenn does?
Yeah, you know, they haven't been blitzing as much as they did last year. I think last year they were 7th in the NFL in blitz rate, and through 2 games this year, they're about 23rd. So maybe try to get more creative and you dial up more blitzes. Maybe try some stunts inside with the defensive tackles. Because right now they're just kind of running straight and getting, you know, running right into a wall, basically, is how it's been through 2 games. So maybe you try to get more creative in your angles and your pass rush routes. But, man, they got to do something because it's really not working. And if they don't, this offense can really tee off on them.
Buggs and Martin, 2 guys we thought would play. Obviously, the Isaiah Buggs situation, you know better than me, never got off to a good start going back to minicamp. Do you think he plays this week, and do you think they give the rookie a chance?
You know, I did see a tweet that said from Buggs that kind of hinted that he might be active for this game. So maybe that's it. You know, maybe you try to get him more involved. And I was surprised that he was inactive for the first 2 games. I guess the Chiefs game kind of made more sense to me than the Seahawks game, but maybe we'll see him back. Broderick Martin, it seemed like he just wasn't ready. He looked good in training camp at parts, but he kind of stalled probably towards the second half in the preseason. So, you know, that was kind of expected. He was more of a project 3rd rounder than a guy that's expected to play right away. But at this point, like, I don't see the you know, how that could hurt them trying to throw out more guys and try to create something because they're just not generating much at all. So, yeah, maybe this is a game where you see 1 or 2 of those guys more involved.
It's interesting. The Lions for years had no linebackers. Now all of a sudden they have too many. It seems like, right?
Yeah.
And they love what Derek Barnes has done, and as have I. And now Tracy Walker steps in for Gardner Johnson, whereas in years past it was a giant drop off between the starter and the backups. That's a Brad Holmes notch in his belt. There's some depth there, but now they got to get stops.
Yeah, no doubt. The linebackers I thought it played pretty well against the run. I think the pass coverage in the Seahawks was not great. Those tight ends kind of ate them alive. So they're gonna have to get back on track and pass coverage there. But yeah, and then looking at the secondary, CJ is a tough dude to replace, but it's nice when you have a former captain who once was viewed as your best DB as a reserve this year. That kind of shows you how far the depth has come. Brian Brands and CJ kind of, created this spot for him on the bench, I guess is what you could say.
Yeah.
But they're definitely going to need him now just with the injury. And I imagine he'll step in right away and play some solid ball. Tracy's been a guy that's always prepared, stays ready, so he doesn't have to get ready, whatever. So I would imagine that he'll step in and look like his old self. So we'll see.
I mentioned before, Colton, about Derek Barnes. How do you like the linebacker rotation? Because it just seems like the one thing that, Barnes makes good play, and then the next series he's not out there. But again, they've got to get Jack Campbell on the field. He was a first-round pick. How do you think they're maneuvering that so far?
Probably as best as they can. I think when they drafted Jack Campbell, they didn't expect Barnes to look as good as he is right now. Maybe that kind of motivated him to get right this offseason, but it certainly helped and certainly motivated him, it seems like, because he's their best run defender right now on the field. It's, I think he had a couple stops per PFF, was in the backfield routinely. So he's doing his part. It seems like pass coverage is like the one area. And that's sort of how I see them kind of rotating. Like in third down, they put Jack Campbell out there. In early downs, they put Barnes out there. So I think that's how they kind of like to use them. And maybe they can carve out a role for both of them that way. But I do think they need to overall get better at pass coverage because he's still a young guy. He's still figuring some things out. Not
a good game Sunday for Jerry Jacobs, although PFF gave him a better score than I thought they would. But again, when all the D linemen were at the bottom of the list, I guess that was kind of comparable. But do you think that was just a bad day for Jerry? And do you have any concerns about what's going on at corner with him?
Jerry certainly competes, and he has a mentality that they love out of a cornerback, and he's certainly worth the spot on the 53-man roster. But I do think they signed, a guy like Emmanuel Mosley for a reason. They saw a weakness at cornerback, and I think they were expecting him to be healthy by now, but he's had the hamstring, he's still recovering from the ACL. So I'm not sure exactly when we'll see him. But I do think when he's ready to go, he'll probably, take Jerry's spot in the starting lineup. But in the meantime, like Jerry has a chance to bounce back, those are a rough one, but it happens. You have to have a short memory as a cornerback in the NFL. And I imagine he'll do that, and he has that in him. So we'll see if he can bounce back.
Crowd Sunday was unreal, right? I mean, you have to figure for this week. I don't know if it'll be dialed down because of the hype that went into the home opener, but I love how the players are all saying, "Look, we know we lost this game, but we need this fan base back this coming Sunday." How much fun was it to be in the building this week?
Oh, it was electric. It was pretty crazy. That was like the loudest I've ever heard it. Not that I've been around long, but it was definitely more noticeable than it was in even last year. Just like every time that the Seahawks offense took the field, like it was deafening. Like I could barely hear myself think. So the players definitely noticed that, and I think they kind of feel guilty for not being able to take advantage of it, especially in a home opener where you've got everyone there and everyone's excited and you've told everyone to come, and then you kind of lay an egg like that. So I imagine, they'll hope that a similar crowd is there, and they haven't lost them yet. But again, it's on the players to kind of give them something to root for and keep their interest throughout the season, not just, the home opener.
All right, final couple of minutes coming up with Colton. I want to ask him about the division, what's going on around the NFC North. We'll do that coming up next, though, real fast on PrizePicks. I've been telling you guys about this game and just the amount of fun, the amount of money you can win with our friends at PrizePicks. All you got to do is pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection. So pick 2 players, pick 4 players, 5, whatever, or 6, and watch the winnings roll in. If you think that this weekend Bijan Robinson's going to go over 80 yards, going to go below 80 yards, put that money down at prizepicks.com. Same thing with the numbers for Jared Goff or any of the Lions or Falcons or the Thursday night game. Have fun with it. Justin Jefferson for less than 100 yards is a gamble. Maybe you would do that and win some earnings and have some fun with our friends at PrizePicks. Make your picks, submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. It is that easy to do. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports, made easy. All right, Colton Poucy, athletic.com, back with me here on a Wednesday, Locked on Lions. Thanks for making us your first listen, checking us out wherever you get your podcasts, and watching us on our Locked on Lions YouTube channel. Please subscribe. All right, my friend, the rest of the division. Hey, Lions are 1-1, but hey, first place. You kind of knew there would be nobody at 2-0. I don't think we thought all the teams would lose last week, but what are your impressions so far of what you've seen around the NFC North?
Yeah, not a great division, I guess is the lightest way to say it, which is kind of what I expected. But the NFC South, the fact that they're kind of beating up on the NFC North so far, that's been kind of surprising because I thought that division would be worse. But yeah, man, I mean, the Bears losing to the Buccaneers, and they don't look great. Justin Fields, he's looking like he might not have a job in Chicago for much longer if they get one of these early picks and, a Caleb Williams is available. Jordan Love, I've been impressed with him with the Packers, and I think going into the season, they were kind of the number 2 team to me behind the Lions, more so than the Vikings, just because I think their defense is ready to go. I like the way they drafted a lot with the tight ends, Jaden Reed, a Michigan State guy. So it seems to me that they just needed a quarterback, and Jordan Love has looked excellent through 2 games so far. And then the Vikings, man, I don't know, it could get kind of tough for them. They still got to play the Chiefs. I think they got the 49ers coming up in a few weeks. So their schedule is going to get tougher from here on out, and they're already 0-2. So, we'll see how they bounce back. But they were a team that I thought overachieved last year, and now they're maybe coming back down to earth a little bit. So if you're the Lions, I know the injuries are kind of concerning, but at least the division isn't entirely overwhelming, and it still looked like it's there for the taking. So maybe that's something that you can hang your hat on for a little bit here.
It's interesting that, a lot of times on the network and just whether it's Athletic or wherever you're reading, they talk about the quarterbacks in this division, and yet through 2 weeks, and it's only 2, but for passer rating, the top 3 quarterbacks are all in this division. And, Jared Goff has played very well. You and I haven't even touched on that, but but Jordan Love, like you said, has been as advertised, and Cousins' numbers aren't bad. Right. He's just on a bad team right now.
Yeah, Cousins is never the issue for me, I guess, for the Vikings, because he's good enough to win some games with. It's just, I question their defense. I'm not sure their running game is going to get going here, and outside of Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins, there's not much. Jordan Addison, I'll give them that too. They got some pieces, but offensively, they're still their defense still hasn't improved a lot to me. And their schedule is pretty tough because they got that first place schedule in the NFC North from last year. And yeah, Jordan Love, I think he's definitely looked the part so far. So I'm excited to see what he can do. We'll see him in a couple weeks in Green Bay when the Lions head up there. So yeah, the quarterbacks played well outside of Justin Fields, really.
Yeah, is there anything to do with, I call him the Hall of Fields because I just thought everybody was putting him in the Hall of Fame this offseason. and at Ohio State, all those guys have always had the great system there, but just so much talent around them. And now you throw these guys in the NFL, not all of them, but it's not been great numbers-wise for Ohio State quarterbacks. We'll see how C.J. Stroud does this year. But, man, it's just for Justin Fields, whether you give him the weapons or not, just the vision, and even when he has time, it's just not working.
Yeah, I'm not a Bears fan. I did grow up in the Chicagoland area, so I got a lot of friends that were asking me about Justin Fields and hyping him up this offseason. I'm just like, has he learned how to read a defense yet? Because that's sort of we know he can run, we know he can throw a deep ball, but it's the stuff in between that kind of matters. And he hadn't shown that yet. And through 2 games, he looks even worse. He's just kind of casually dropping back, slowly scanning the field, check down to the running back, and there are guys that are open free over the middle that he's just missing entirely. So, yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe it is that Ohio State system, but he hasn't looked good. And, if he keeps playing like this, they're going to have to move on.
Final thing, the start of the year, it was, all right, Philly and San Francisco, who would be that third team in the NFC? Certainly some people voted for the Lions and said, hey, maybe it can be Detroit. Dallas looks like that team right now, don't they?
They really do. Their defense is legit. In fantasy, I drafted their defense in 2 of my 3 leagues because I kind of knew. So very happy with that decision.
That's what it's all about, Cole.
Absolutely. But yeah, the defense is great. Tony Pollard was their best running back last year, even with Zeke Elliott on the roster. And now he's kind of proven that again this year. So really, they have the pieces in place to make a run. I know it's the Cowboys, so people are always hesitant, but man, they look really good. And, they look like they can contend for the top 3 in the NFC right now.
Colton, great to see you. Thanks for the visit. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Colton Poucy, theathletic.com. Follow him on Twitter at Colton_Poucy. Subscribe to The Athletic. Get all of the stuff that Colton does. This is not just the usual beat writer fare, and the Lions beat guys do a great job, and girls, but Colton's stuff is extensive and awesome. Check his stuff out at theathletic.com. We'll do the crossover tomorrow right here on the Locked On Lions.